And once again, hello and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Franklin. I'm one of the two co-founders of the Northern California Spinal Cord Injury Foundation, also known as NorCal SCI. Welcome to tonight's presentation on strengthening the sleepy side of your SCI body. And yes, I have one of those sleepy sides too. So I'm anxious to see what Rach is going to share with us. So just a few points that I want to bring up. As always, we have everyone muted, so that way we can eliminate any background distractions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of Rach's presentation. So I will ask somewhere around 5:30, 5:40 if you have any questions to feed them to me through the chat feature on Zoom. Second thing, as always, these presentations are made possible thanks to donors, and our donors are now taking up our call to make these presentations possible on an ongoing basis for our audience. So we're grateful to them. And finally, we are recording this presentation as we always do, and that way, if you need to refer back to it or share it with anyone or anyone else that was not able to join us tonight, they'll be able to watch the recording. It'll be in everyone's inbox first thing tomorrow morning. So without further ado, let me introduce or reintroduce Rach. She's a nationally certified Pilates teacher, certified strength and conditioning specialist, and a movement teacher specializing in working with people with neurological deficits, especially spinal cord injuries. And she was just recently certified and licensed as a massage therapist. And Rach, this is going to be your 13th month in a row of doing these things. So you started last June, believe it or not, June of 2020. So thanks for continuing to make the commitment to serve our spinal cord injury community, and welcome and take it away.
Wow, that is legit very wild to think about. Oh my goodness, it's a journey. Um, awesome, cool. Well, hi everybody. As always, thank you, Franklin and NorCal SCI, for hosting this. I love these workshops because unlike some of the classes and sessions that I teach on a normal basis, this really allows me to jump more into the educational component of what I do, which is great. It's yeah, it gives you all information so you can take this and run with it and do whatever feels right for you. All right, I'm going to share my screen here, so just give me 1 minute. All right, great. Okay. All right, so yes, how to strengthen the sleepy side of your body. So language is important here, and words really matter. So I just wanted to start by explaining this because I feel like this is um, language and the words that me as a movement teacher use and words as you, the student, the client, use are really, really powerful and really, really important. Um, the reason that I use sleepy instead of weak, like you might hear or read about, or maybe even think of your own body, is because weak has kind of a negative connotation with it. So, um, I think it's really important to keep in mind that whether we're using the words like weak or useless or just any of those words that have negative connotations with them, to keep in mind that what we think gets translated into our brain is something called neuroplasticity and can move through our bodies in ways that we might not even be consciously aware of. Um, there's a doctor, Dr. Andrew Newberg, who wrote this book, Words Can Change Your Brain. He's a neuroscientist, and he wrote it with this communications expert. And he says, a single word has the power to influence the expression of genes that regulate physical and emotional strength. By holding a positive and optimistic word in your mind, you stimulate frontal lobe activity, meaning the frontal lobe of the brain. This area includes specific language centers that connect directly to the motor cortex, responsible for moving you into action. So this is the part of the brain that physically moves you. And as our research has shown, the longer you concentrate on positive words, the more you begin to affect other areas of your brain. So, what you think is who you are and how you move. Okay. So, this might seem kind of silly, but it's just a friendly reminder to just do a quick check of yourself. What kinds of harmful words, language, thoughts are you having about your body, your limbs, your strength, how you might look in a mirror? And how is that translating into your hormonal response, your stress response, your nervous system response, and your movement, your actual physical movement. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to throw that out there as a friendly reminder that this is why I'm using the word like sleepier. You'll hear me say your less dominant side, just because this kind of stuff matters, and it doesn't just affect the way you think, it actually affects your hormones, your nervous system, and your movement. Okay, so why do we have a less dominant side or a sleepier side? I'm going to take you through just a handful of reasons here, but this is just a handful of maybe one of 100 reasons. These are just things that I see often and things that I am constantly asking my clients about. So I'm just going to talk through some of these. So, we often think of, okay, this side of my body was more affected by the spinal cord injury, if for folks on here that maybe have had strokes or multiple sclerosis or whatever it might be, for something that is more affected by the injury. But it's also really important to keep in mind, what did the shape of your body look like pre-injury? Um, what kind of injuries did you sustain? What did your alignment look like? I don't care if you were 3 years old, if you were 18 years old, or if you were 42 years old. Remember, our tissues remember. They remember trauma, they remember injuries, they remember emotional, spiritual, physical, all of the injuries and traumas of the body, and they hold on to those injuries unless we're able to move through them again, physically, emotionally, spiritually, through the meridians, whatever it is, the kind of work that you're doing. So just keeping that in mind, like, maybe an injury you sustained playing a sport, or in just a random injury you sustained pre-spinal cord injury, how is that affecting your body? And I kind of talked to that alignment pre-injury. Were you um, the kind of person pre-injury that had a desk job, so you were kind of in a desk position all day? Were you active? Were you a hiker? Uh, um, did you have a stronger side pre-injury, and maybe that is you're still holding some of those same patterns post-injury? Yeah, so I kind of touched on that. And then obviously a very big one is just the nature of your spinal cord injury. Um, I know a lot of this, reflecting back on the injury itself can be hard and traumatic. So I'm not asking you to go there if that is not appropriate for you, but just being aware that perhaps how your injury happened, the part of the spinal cord that was damaged, like not just the part of the spinal cord in terms of cervical, thoracic, lumbar, but I mean, like, if you're looking at your spinal canal, where did the vertebra come into impact with your spinal cord? And based on the spinal cord and how the spinal cord is set up internally versus externally, is that the reason for why maybe you feel temperature on one side of your body and not your other? Is that the reason for why your right side is much stronger than your left side? So just in general, the nature of your injury and what happened is also a huge determinant of that. Grip strength, and this goes for any kind of grip strength, hand mobility, hand strength, arm strength, forearm strength, whatever it might be. Post injury, let's say maybe you were right hand dominant. But after the injury, your right side was more affected and you became more left-handed. So remember, when you become more left-handed or whatever it is for you, if you're reaching for a glass of water, if you're bending over to pick something up off of the floor, if you're driving with your left hand, that that also is going to dictate some of the rotations in our body, what we're doing on that side of our body, or tilt this down, or through certain patterns of our body. So, yeah, and that can be super relevant, especially for folks that really rely on your hands to do most of what you're doing, to either get around, to grab, to balance yourself, that kind of a thing. And then an obvious one that most of you are probably very familiar with, but seated posture. So I've talked about the probably talked about your posture in all 13 of these prior workshops. So revisit any of the posture ones if you want to look more into that. But how are you in your chair? Is there a side of you that maybe feels more slumped? Is there a part of your chair that maybe gives you more support where the other side doesn't give you as much as support? And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing about your chair, but the way that you're seated all day and the kind of cushions you're sitting on and the kind of movement you're getting throughout the day obviously have a really big effect on which side is kind of catered towards the dominant side and what patterns exist through your body. Okay, and I'll just touch on this briefly. I did one workshop on the visual system, one workshop on the vestibular system, and I talk about how, in both of those workshops, how we orient ourselves around our eyes and or our vestibular system, which is an inner unit in our inner ear that helps with balance and proprioception. This kind of comes into the category a little bit of scoliosis for those of you that either had scoliosis pre-injury or developed scoliosis post-injury, which is actually more common than most folks realize. Um, yeah, given the nature of how that scoliosis developed, usually the visual system is involved. So, um, if you're growing up and we all have a dominant eye, and we're orienting for whatever reason, or maybe there was even an injury to the eye when you were young, and we're orienting around one of your eyes. Remember, if I'm orienting around my better eye, I'm going to be tilting my head, I'm going to be adjusting my thorax, I'm going to be adjusting my hips. And I'm exaggerating right now on the camera, but to a certain extent, when we're really trying to orient around our dominant eye, or you might find that you're the kind of person that tilts your head always to one side, like when you're sympathizing with someone, when you're trying to understand something. Again, that usually has to do with our visual system and our visual system and our vestibular system. So to a certain degree, we all are in little ways orienting around our dominant eye. It might not be as obvious as all of these twists and turns of the body. But for folks who have scoliosis out there, especially um, scoliosis that developed before your injury, there are quite a few studies that are linking the visual system to that scoliosis. So that scoliosis developed because we were trying to orient around our dominant eye, and our spine and the rest of our body is orienting around the visual system because the eyes basically dictate everything that we do in life. So I'm not going to really get too much into the scoliosis world and how to address that, because that could be a whole nother workshop within itself. Um, and there's also a lot of complications within scoliosis of it's typically not just one side is shortened. There's typically a shortened side, a twisted side. There's another shortened side and twisted side of the neck. So it kind of, even though if you think you have a C curve, for those of you that understand C or S curves, if you have scoliosis, it usually is a bit more complex than that. Anyway, just to say that I'm going to today really stick with the basics of a less dominant side, not really pertaining to scoliosis, although you could apply some of these to scoliosis, but it also looks quite different if you do have scoliosis. Okay, so just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so what is the goal here? All right, a little bit of balance can go a long way, like this bird is trying to figure out. Um, the goal with this workshop and waking up your sleepier side is not to get we're not trying to get to perfect where both the left side and the right side of your body are perfectly balanced and in harmony and everything is working beautifully. We're just trying to bring you a little bit closer to that line of balance. I think it's actually really natural for the body. I have never met a balanced body in my life. Uh, I think it's overrated. We're just trying to get a little bit closer to balance. Um, and when I'm talking about balance, I'm talking about everything. We're trying to get that less dominant side a little bit stronger. We're trying to get the shortened side longer, the longer side shorter. We're just trying to bring the needle a little bit closer to balance. So just setting the intention that, again, we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to move the needle a little bit closer. Okay. So I'm gonna guess that for most folks out there, you probably have a pretty good idea of what is that sleepier side, what is your less dominant side. That being said, it's not always super obvious, and sometimes we have a misunderstanding of um, sometimes we think that the more active side and sometimes the shortened side is the more dominant side, and that's not always true. So I'm just going to give you a couple of tips of if you're trying to figure out like, well, I think this side is is sleepier than this side. I'm just going to give you a few tips here. So when I'm talking about, let me just finish clicking through this. Okay. So when I'm talking about this kind of work, I'm going to talk about it mainly from starting from the base of your pelvis. So if you've come to my other workshops, you've heard me say that the pelvis is the foundation of the house. If we don't have a nice, flat, and level foundation to your house, then that means that the house is going to be kind of crooked. We're trying to build this crooked house on this crooked foundation. So, again, just for simplistic terms, where we're going to focus today is starting from your pelvis and your low back. So, if you're able to right now, I just want all of you, and you might need to lean forward in your chair, but I want all of you to put your hands, and it doesn't necessarily have to be my thumbs like it is in this photo, but I want you to put your hands in some kind of an orientation similar to what I have in this picture. What you're looking for, what you're looking to touch right now, is those two ridges, those two kind of mountain ranges of muscle that you might be feeling on either side of your spine. And actually, I'm just going to maybe show you a little bit myself here. Okay, so you're just looking for, and the lighting might not be great, but these two ridges of muscle on either side of the spine. And I just want you to use a really soft touch here. And you're just, I mean, you can see like I'm not poking and prodding. I'm just feeling that area. And I'm feeling for which side feels more developed, which side feels like it has more tone in it. And when I'm using the word tone here, I'm really just meaning what side feels like it has more muscle mass in this resting position that you're currently sitting in, which side feels like it has more muscle mass, and you're just feeling, and maybe you're even feeling one side is maybe more sensitive than the other. um, Maybe you're feeling like, whoa, this is very obvious, I know exactly which side is my more dominant side. But you're just feeling, and you can even start to walk your hands up if you have the capacity to do this. You can start walking your hands up your back instead of just palpating and touching the low back. You can start to feel the muscle going up maybe towards your mid back, and maybe even your upper back if you're able to feel that. If it's hard for you to do this, you can have a partner or a helper or someone doing this for you if you lean forward in your chair, and they can just kind of touch that area for you and let you know what they see, or they can even take a video of your back and they can show it to you. I'm a really big fan. I'm going to get into self-touch in a second, but I'm a really big fan of being able to physically see your back at least every once in a while. This might sound kind of silly, but we have this whole part of our body, a whole part of, in fact, half of our body that we physically can't see unless we are able to somehow look at ourselves back in a mirror or have a picture taken of us or a video taken of us from the back. If we're not doing a lot of self-touch and a lot of intentional work to bring the our I'm going to refer to it as your back body. If we're not doing intentional work to bring the back body into your mental awareness, into your movement routine, and into just your everyday um, movement around the house and whatever it is you're doing, then the map of our back body and our brains is kind of fuzzy. If you were to touch one part of my back, I might be confused, like, where are you touching? Same thing goes with muscle engagement and connection. So the reason I say maybe have somebody take a photo or a video of your back, or if you're able to use a mirror and somehow look at a mirror of your back, this can just be really helpful because it can start to help you map your back a little bit better. Um, yeah, I suggest this to all of my clients. I just think it's important to be able to physically see and absolutely to be able to touch the back of your body if you're able to do so. And if you're not able to do so, to have some kind of a helper touch the back of your body, whether or not you have sensation there, just so that we can start to map that area, however dull or sharp that sensation might be. Okay. So self-touch. So when we're just trying to figure out what is the sleepier side, we're we're going to assess. We're going to touch ourselves, or we're going to have someone touch our backs for us. And then just thinking about, and again, through all of these workshops, when we've been doing a bunch of different movements on the floor with TheraBands in a seated position, just thinking about what kinds of movements are harder for me. Is it harder for me to side bend to my left than it is to my right? Is it harder for me to reach for something with my right hand versus my left hand? So again, these kind of obvious things, but starting to put those together, like, huh, it's easier to reach across my body than it is to reach in front of me. Okay, so we're just mapping, like, what are the easy movements? Um, where is your body stronger and more supportive? And where could we spend a little bit more time strengthening, finding the connection through? And then, just as another reminder here, I'm calling this the sleepier side of your body. It's not always just as simple as left versus right, because remember, we have something called myofascial meridians that crisscross throughout your body. Just as a reminder, these myofascial meridians are basically patterns of muscle and connective tissue that are linked together throughout the body and and integrate and move together in these patterned ways. So this photo of the skeletons and the myofascial meridians in the bottom right hand corner here is showing something called your functional line, which is one of your 12 or 13 myofascial meridians. And you'll see that on the back side, and I've talked about this before, but it crosses in the back. So it goes from your right shoulder to your left butt cheek, and then vice versa on the other side. Similarly, we have something in the front of our bodies called our spiral lines. That photo isn't here. That cross going in the front. So again, we have right shoulder to left hip, and then vice versa. So we kind of have this X of fascia and muscles in the front of our body, and we have this X of fascia and muscles in the back of our body. And then it can sometimes even keep spiraling down the legs after that. So again, just to demonstrate here that where your sleepier parts are can crisscross, and it might not make much sense to you, but it makes sense in the neuromuscular and myofascial meridian world. So for example, I have a client where when she does bridges on one of her legs, the what we call the back line, so like the back side of her leg is stronger than the lateral side of her leg. And on her other leg, it's totally flip-flopped. Uh, Flip-flopped to whatever I just said. The lateral line is stronger than the back line. So balancing on a single leg is easier for her on the left side, but doing a bridge is easier for her on the right side. So again, just to say, and I'm not going to go into super detail with that, but just taking notes of when you're doing certain movements, what is easier, and maybe the why behind it isn't as important unless you're a why person like I am. But just knowing like, okay, these are the sleepier parts of my body. Doing some kind of a balancing movement or a pulling movement on the left side of my body is harder. That's where I'm going to spend some extra times, some extra repetitions, some extra sets. Okay, make sure I'm not missing anything here. Yes. And then also to say that with this crisscross of patterns, and that's also to say, let me just rewind for a sec. That's also to say that some of you might just be like, no, actually, the entire left side of my body is sleepier than the entire right side of my body. And that's a common pattern too. But I just wanted to mention that patterns can crisscross there. Also, just being aware, and this is getting a little bit more into seated posture, which is some of my prior workshops, but just knowing that, and I've actually have several clients where they have a more dominant side and then their ribs are rotated, and that confuses them a little bit, like, well, but this is my more dominant side and I'm rotated this way, and what does that mean? Again, that's just more information to you. So if it's easier for you to rotate one way, can we bring you closer to alignment? So can I have my chest facing forward, and can I do some of these strengthening exercises that I'm going to show you in a few minutes? Can we try to do those in the most aligned position as possible? I've also mentioned some of those prior posture workshops to use props if you need to. We have this saying, and this also goes for folks who have scoliosis, to prop what is dropped. So if you find that sticking a wedge, maybe just a small wedge under one of your hips, or putting a rolled up towel in the small of your back is really helpful before doing some of these exercises. That's not cheating. I highly encourage you to do that and to use those props only as much as you need. And then if you don't need them anymore, you can always take them away. Okay, I think I covered everything there. Yes, okay. So getting into some of these exercises, let's see, how do I want to do this? I'm just going to quickly walk you through, and then I'm going to come out of the PowerPoint presentation. We're going to talk about tapping and rubbing the body and how important that is. And then I'm going to show you a couple of exercises in a seated position, a couple of exercises on your back. So for those of you that would like to and or are able to transfer to a bed floor space, we're going to get there in maybe like 10 minutes or so. So if you need to prepare yourself, you have that. An exercise in a side lying position, in a quadruped, and then one exercise in a standing position. And then of course I had to bring the animals back. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to stop sharing this. Okay, give me one sec. Let me just pull those exercises up again so you can really see me here. Okay, great. Okay, so starting in a seated position. So just for easeful purposes for this presentation, I'm gonna mirror you here. So I want you, hopefully you kind of have an idea of, at least for the lower part of your body, meaning lower back, around your pelvis area, um, what is your less dominant side? What is your sleepy side? Okay, so I want you to do everything on that side. I'm just going to kind of make up a side. So I'm going to say that my left side, and again, I'm going to mirror you. My left side is my sleepier side. Okay. So in your chair, in the seated position here, the first exercise I had on there was, I call them gum hip hikes. Okay. So what I mean by this is the cue that I give people. I love this cue. Is I want you to imagine on your sleepier side, I want you to imagine that you just sat in gum under just that butt cheek. Okay. So right now, under my left butt cheek, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just sat in gum. This sucks. And I'm going to try to peel my butt cheek, or as much as my butt cheek, off of the chair as I can. Okay. So I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm just going to talk you through as I do this. Notice that as I do this, my body is actually weighting onto my more dominant side. I'm weighting more onto my right sit bone. That's okay. Don't freak out. I know you might be thinking, like, oh my gosh, I'm putting more weight on there. But really, what's going on right now, and you can even take your hand or both of your hands and put them on your low back and even your side body, and just feel. And this might be hard for you to feel, and this movement might also be really challenging for a lot of you. If this movement's challenging for you, I'm gonna give you another way to do this. So just hang with me for a second. For those of you that are able to do this movement, I want you to notice and hopefully feel engagement in that whole low back and side body. Okay. So you're trying to lift your gum, your butt cheek out of the gum only on that less dominant side. Can you feel those muscles engaging? Or is that still maybe a little sleepy for you? Yeah, okay, I got a couple thumbs up. That's great. Yeah. And then just being mindful that this isn't a lean. Okay. This is what I call a hip hike. So I'm trying to hike the left side of my pelvis. Notice if I do a lean, yes, I'm lifting my butt cheek out of the gum, which is good news, but I'm defeating the purpose because this side of my body isn't shortening, and therefore it's not contracting, connecting, or engaging. So the reason that so you'll see, like, my head my head and my tail are actually moving together. I'm not letting my head tilt away from me. Okay? There's nothing wrong with doing a lean of your body, but for the purposes of strengthening the sleepier side and lifting your butt cheek out of the gum, I want it to be more of a side bend, hip hike motion. Okay. Yeah, so that looks good. I see a lot of folks trying that out. You can even, just for comparison, if you wanted to, you could try that same movement out, get your other butt cheek out of gum on the other side, and just see, like, okay, this is what it feels like on my dominant side. This is what it feels like on my sleepier side. Just so that you have that comparison. When you're doing this as part of your home program, maybe even when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, I want you to focus obviously on that sleepier side, but it's always nice to do a check in with the dominant side and just see how that feels comparatively. Again, we're not going for perfect. We're just trying to bring that needle a little bit closer to the balance part. Okay, so next one is going to be a side bend. So for folks where you're having a really hard time lifting your butt cheek out of gum, I'm going to give you a couple of things. It's not cheating, at least for right now. It's not cheating to use your hand on the armchair of your chair. If you need that little bit of support to push into the arm to get that butt cheek out of gum, then use that support, because your body's doing the same movement and we're helping to establish that connection meaning we're helping to stimulate those nerve endings going through your connective tissue, not necessarily through your spinal cord, but through your connective tissue. We're helping to stimulate those nerves to get that pattern back in your body, to establish that connection, and then to strengthen that connection. Okay, so again, if you find that you can get that movement by just simply pushing into the armchair of your chair, then you can absolutely do that. For folks where that movement still feels really challenging to do, we're just going to bring this into a side bend. You have the option to bring arms overhead. This makes it a little bit harder. We can also just cross the arms over the body, which just makes it a little bit more attainable if an overhead arm reach is a bit too much. You're going to do the same thing, except you're going to side bend towards that side. So again, this is for folks who have a hard time doing the gum hip hikes. The gum hip hikes is the one I want you to start with. But if you're unable to do that, you're going to do the side bend. You can put that hand on your side body and your low back and feel if you're still getting that same engagement, connection, stimulation. It's okay if you're not. It might take you a couple hundred repetitions to do this. But this is another good one, yeah. And you can do it with arms overhead. This makes it harder. If you want to make it even harder, you can hold like a small weight or even a ball overhead as you do that side bend. I'm going to backtrack because I forgot one of the most important things I just realized. Come on, Con. Okay, before we do any of this work, we're going to do it right now, so don't worry, we're not missing out, is self-touch and self-rubbing. So we use self-touch to identify which maybe parts of your body, which sides are sleepier. We also use self-touch to bring, like I mentioned with your back body, we use self-touch to bring that area of the body back into the brain, okay? Before we do any of this movement, I highly encourage you to do some, actually, I'll leave my shirt down for this one, to do a scratch, a rub, anything, tapping. You can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with this. But the sleepier side of your body, again, whether or not you have sensation, I want you to give that area a little bit of love. You're waking it up. You're mapping that side of your body on your brain on something called your motor cortex. If that sounds familiar, it was in that quote I read to you in the beginning of class. The clearer the map of your body that your brain has, the more efficient your movement is going to be. For those of you that have followed my workshops, we call this input versus output. So the more input, the more information I can give my brain of, this is my low back. I'm rubbing this area. This is my side body. This is my abs. The more information I can give, the better your brain can interpret that information, and then the more efficient motor output, meaning the more efficient movement your body can then do and move through and achieve. Okay. Okay, so we woke that part of the body up, and again, at whatever feels good. The point of that self-touch and increasing something called your interoception, which is your body's internal sense of what it's feeling. The more information we have and the better it feels, the happier your brain is going to be and the better your movement's going to be. So just do what feels good. Okay, so those gum hip hikes and that side bend, arms either crossed or overhead, are really great when you're in a seated position. I'm going to move to the floor. These are things that you can do either from the floor or from your bed. Okay, sure. Okay, we're going to do something similar on the floor, but now we've just changed the relationship that we have with gravity. So it just makes your body work in a slightly different way here. So let's see, I'll show you this side. Okay. I'm realizing this might hard to see from this angle, but I'll show you from a couple different angles. So in a lying down position, if you are able to bend your knees, you can bend the knees. If you need someone helping you, you can do that. You can also use a bolster or something to keep the knees bent. The reason the knees don't have to be bent, the reason I bend them is just when our knees are bent, it gives our pelvis a little bit more freedom to wiggle and move if you have that movement in your body. Okay, so it's just a little bit easier with knees bent. Okay, just for visual reasons, I'm going to push that bolster out of the way. So I like to put my hands, I'm just going to turn and show you, where I've got my fingertips on the bony corner of my hip and my thumbs at the base of my rib cage. Okay, so my hands are here so I can feel the distance that my torso is moving, the distance my pelvis is moving. This is just a way to self-touch whatever is helpful for you, whether hands are on the ribs, both hands are on the hips, the stomach, whatever is helpful for you, do that. And you're just going to do, again, a hip hike in this position. So let's see, we were going to my left side before, and this is a really, really small movement, but all I'm doing is that same, almost like imagining I was in gum, but now I'm doing it from this lying down position. I'm hiking this hip up to my ribs. Okay, so I'm releasing and then I'm hiking, releasing and hiking. Okay, and I'm just moving through that. Hopefully, yeah, I think you're able to see that. And I'm using the exact same muscles. I'm using low back muscles, maybe a little bit of obliques, but really I want that focus to still be on that mid and low back area. It's possible you might only feel this more in your mid back or at the base of your shoulder. Remember, we have muscles there that help do this movement. Even if you're only moving a centimeter or two, you're helping to establish that connection into a lower place, to establish the connection, to strengthen the connection, and to bring a little bit more balance to your body. Okay, likewise, so those are the hip hikes from a seated position. Likewise, we can come into what I call a crescent shape. Okay, so again, if I'm trying to strengthen this side of my body, and you can have somebody moving your legs if you need help here, but they'll move your legs to the side, and then I'm going to kind of adjust my upper body so that I'm in this crescent banana shape going towards my sleepier side. I can bring arms overhead and I can just do these little movements where I'm kind of moving myself to the center and then I'm moving myself all the way over to the side, but I'm actively trying to shorten that side. You can even just stay here and do these little pulses, trying to bring that shoulder. Again, this is basically a side bend. Remember when I just did a seated side bend? This is a lying down side bend. Okay, I'm just moving my shoulder closer to my hip to activate that whole sleepier side. It's no different than what we were doing here. Okay, so those two I just showed you on the floor are the same as getting your butt cheek out of the gum and then finding that side bend to the side. It's just doing it from a supine position for those of you that are able to get down on the floor. It just challenges you in a different way, and it takes you out of that seated position, which is always a plus. Okay, moving on to a side lying position. I'm only going to show you one here, but there are definitely a lot of side lying positions that you can do. Let me think. I want to keep the side that I've been working on consistent with how I'm mirroring you. So, okay, we'll do this. So again, if I'm still trying to strengthen this side here, so you're in a side lie position. Remember, when you're in these side lie positions, you can always use pillows, yoga mats, whatever it is, so that the ankles and the knees are in a somewhat comfortable aligned position. You can also have a pillow under your head, okay? So if you're not able to support your head like that, again, I'm just going to push this away so you can really see what I'm doing here. Okay. In a side lying position, we can work your sleepier side in both side lying positions. I'm going to explain that in a sec. So when we have the sleepier side facing up, the movement is going to be more, and again, whether you need someone assisting you, or maybe like a, I've seen some folks get creative where they're holding a strap and they're kind of pulling a strap and they're doing these like side crunches on that side. So however you're able to get this, and this could be just the head lifting, your shoulders don't have to lift all the way up. You're coming into a side bend here. Again, notice, okay, you're learning all of my secrets right now. Notice that what I'm doing here is the exact same thing as what I did in a seated position, is the exact same thing as what I did in a lying down position. I'm just side bending. I'm side bending towards my sleepier side. Okay. So again, we should be feeling this whole area, hopefully activating, engaging, and connecting. Don't be discouraged if it doesn't come right away. On the other side, let's see. Okay, I'm going to face away from the camera. So now I have my sleepier side on the downstairs side. In comparison to what we just did, now I'm going to do the opposite. Let me make sure you can see me here. Now I'm going to try to lift this bottom side up off of the floor. Okay, so I call this one House of the Mouse. So I'm trying to create this little hole. So like if there was a little mouse running under my ribs, that I would create a little tunnel for them. Okay, so you're trying to lift up that underside. Notice though, it's the same movement. Everything I'm showing you right now is the same movement. We're just trying to shorten and strengthen that sleepier side. Okay, great. Moving into quadruped. Face this way. God, that side of my body is starting to get fatigued here. Okay, so for those of you, these next two are a bit more advanced. So for folks that either by themselves or with the help of a helper or an assister or a partner, if you're able to get into a quadruped, I'm just going to quickly show you this one. Let me get a good angle. Here we go. Okay, so likewise, again, this is going to look very familiar. We're doing the same movement. We're just doing it in a different position, challenging you in a different way. So we're going to find what I call a tail wag towards the sleepier side. Okay, so if I had a tail and I were wagging that tail towards my sleepier side, and notice I'm even trying to drop the shoulder. I'm trying to shorten that whole side of my body. I can even look back as if I were trying to look at my tail. What kind of a tail do you have? Is it a dog tail? Is it a monkey tail? Okay, bringing in those visuals like that and really trying to pretend like you're seeing what kind of a tail you have can be really helpful. Okay, so finding the tail wag to that side. There was one thing I was going to say with that and I just forgot. Yeah, remember with all of this work too, we're strengthening the sleepier side and we're simultaneously opening up, most likely, your dominant shorter side. Okay, so for those of you, I'm just going to stay with a somewhat simple example here. For those of you that maybe find that you are, necklace is getting all caught. For those of you that find that you're, let's see, you're slightly side bended, so you're kind of in this crooked position, towards your more dominant side. I see this often. This might not be the case for you because we all have different twists and turns. But if you're side bending towards your dominant side, remember that every time that we strengthen the sleepier side, we're giving this side a break. We're relieving, we're lengthening this side while we're simultaneously shortening and activating your sleepier side. Okay, just wanted to explain that one because that can sometimes be confusing of short versus long. We oftentimes think of our short side. Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstandings with things that are shortened and tightened. Um, they can be your dominant side. It can also just mean like this is your dominant side and this is the side you're a little tilted more towards. And it might be really strong in a very short range of motion and might be strong here, but is that side able to lengthen? Okay, so when we can work on lengthening that side and strengthening this side, it can also help with our dominant side. It can help to relieve that dominant side. Okay, last one, and then I'll take questions. For folks that are able to stand on here, so whether you're using, make sure I'm in the frame, whether you're using a walker or parallel bars or whatever it is. Actually, I'm gonna tilt down just a little bit more. You can see my lower body. Okay. So again, we're just gonna stay with the same pattern that we've been doing. You're gonna step, just a small step. You're gonna step your sleepier foot, the sleepier side of your body, you're gonna step that foot forward. And all we're doing here, so let's say you've got a walker in front of you, is you're finding a weight shift. I'm gonna give you my profile here. Notice my feet stay flat on the floor. I'm not even taking a step. I'm not doing anything too big of a movement. I'm gonna shift from my back leg, aka the dominant side, to my front leg, the sleepier side. That's how big I'm going, okay? I'm shifting back and I'm shifting forward. My heels don't lift, my toes don't lift. I'm not even bending my knees. I'm not really, I'm not like about to take a step or anything like that. And you can place your hand on that low back if you're able to, or you can have someone else place a hand and you can just feel what's happening. Again, hopefully there's some engagement there as we shift that weight forward onto the front foot. And let your hips just move. It's okay that the hips aren't going to stay super parallel here. They're not supposed to, just because we're really focusing on, again, engaging that low back area, waking that side up, especially for those of you that are able to come to a standing position and feel like this is maybe challenging for you. That's a really good foundational standing weight shift place to start. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Yes. Yeah. So again, with that last one, you're stepping the sleepier side, you're going to step that foot forward. Your more dominant side, that foot is going to be back. Awesome. I think that is it. I'll go ahead and take any questions, but I hope that was helpful.
That's great. Thanks, Rach. Okay, we have some questions. First question is, can you repeat the name of that book that you cited, that sort of sentence at the top of your presentation?
Yes. Words Can Change Your Brain by Dr. Andrew Newberg. I haven't read the whole book. I was really just mainly looking for research on this kind of thing. The books that I have read by another, is he a doctor? He is. Another Dr. Norman Diage is The Brain That Changes Itself and The Brain's Way of Healing. both of those books also speak to neuroplasticity. They talk about movement, they talk about thoughts, and they talk about how all of that affects your brain and the neuroplasticity in your brain. But yeah, sorry, that book was Words Can Change Your Brain by Dr. Andrew Newberg. That's the one I quoted in the beginning.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
next question. Would sleeping in a certain position aid with correcting my posture?
Yeah. You know, to be really honest, I've always wondered about this. I think that people put a lot of weight I think that people put a lot of weight into not physical weight, like emotional weight. People think that their sleeping positions are really, really impacting their bodies and the way they're moving. I think that that is maybe, and yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking through this. I think that that is maybe slightly true. I don't think it does as much as we think it does. When we're sleeping, our whole body is at ease and it's relaxed. And although it's for a good amount of time, it's 8 hours. My line of thought is unless you're in a really extreme, like you are not ever moving in your sleep, you are in one position on your left side every night, night after night. Your bed is 25 years old, like whatever it is. I think unless it is a more extreme condition like that, that worrying about your sleep position isn't the end all be all. That being said, I would say that um, it's not a bad thing to try sleeping in a different position. There's different theories and thoughts on like sleeping on the left side versus the right side. There's a little bit of research behind it. It all goes against each other. It's all kind of controversial. Uh, I I just don't think it's that important. But again, if you are the kind of sleeper where you are knocked out and you're sleeping for like 10 hours a night and nothing ever changes and you're experiencing some discomfort, especially right when you wake up, then maybe it's time to change the way you sleep. Otherwise, I don't think it's a huge deal.
Okay. All right. We have two questions, both of them somewhat similar. There seems to be some confusion about which side. One person says that they tilt on sort of tend to tilt on one side, the other one on the other side. So they're trying to figure out which side is a sleepy side. Uh,
Okay.
so if you're, let's say, if you're tilting more towards the left side, is it your left side that's sleepy or is it your right side that's sleepy?
Yeah. I'm going to answer this in a very general way because I've seen both and I've worked with people who have both. I would say, again, like very general, and I don't even want to use the words the majority of the time, but I'll say most of the time. Is that any better? I'll say most of the time. Um, yeah. If you are side bending, if your natural seated posture is you are, let's say, I'm gonna mirror you. If you are slightly tilted towards your right, my guess is that, yeah, this is just a hard assumption to make because like actually my clients are kind of split down the middle of what side is dominant and what side is not, but I'll explain, maybe I'll just explain both. If you are side bending towards your right, it's it's very possible that your left side is the sleepier side and we need to shorten and strengthen that side to bring you more to a balanced upright position. Okay. On the other hand, it's very possible that because of some structural issues with your spine and your seated posture, you're side bending to the right, but your left side is actually the stronger side because it's basically holding you up all day in this position. And this side is staying engaged and turned on the whole time. In which case, you'd want to come to a balanced position, and this side would be your sleepier side, but it would be important for you to bring yourself to a more aligned position, to even do some stretches in the other position, and then to do some strengthening from an aligned position on your right side. So I've seen both ways. Um, I would say if you're still confused after that explanation I just gave, if you bring your hands to your back and or your belly, like whatever is useful for you, I would stay with your back. And I would say, where does it feel like you have more muscle mass? Um, that will hopefully point you towards the right direction.
No, I think you're spot on. I could see why both sides could be kind of guilty.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, good explanation. Thanks. All right, next question. My sleepiness is less in my torso and more my left leg. Are these the same movements that I would want to use to wake up my leg?
Mm, yeah, that's a really good question. Because this presentation was mainly focused more on the torso, the center of your body, your thorax, the foundation, your pelvis. I would say um, if you feel like you've got a good handle on kind of the upper body and the torso, then if it's really just feels like it's your sorry, I don't know what side you said, but like if you feel like your left glute and the left outside of your hip and your whole left leg is the sleepier side, um, then you're just going to be one you're going to want to you're going to want to do anything that is single-sided through that left side. If you can do single, and this is kind of outside of what I talked about in the workshop, but just a couple of things like if you can come up to, I'm assuming that if you know that information, you can probably come to more upright positions. Again, I'm making assumptions here, but you can do some weight shifting, some balancing work, even some split kneeling work, shifting forward back. You can do some bridging work, focusing on that sleepier left side. And if you're able to come to a standing position, really getting that left side in like a single leg balance. Again, if you're able to, or even weight shifts and doing sit to stands or something where you've got like 70% on the left and 30% on the right would be helpful. All of that being said, these exercises will be helpful if you're able to determine, because remember everything is connected. So if your left side is your sleepy side and you're noticing that your left low back and maybe even mid back are have less muscle mass, then these exercises are still going to help you, and they're just going to give you that much of a stronger foundation to do some of that single leg work that I just mentioned. So they'll still be helpful if you're noticing that that is the pattern that continues going up the body.
Okay. Next question. My left side upper torso muscles are always contracted from the injury. Is this my sleepy side? So this kind of goes back to what you responded a couple of questions ago.
Mhm.
So the left side
Yeah, is the contracted side.
contract.
Yeah, I would say, especially if it's the muscles up between the shoulder blades. Um, Another test you could do is if you're still kind of unsure, like, okay, the side is the shortened side and the contracted side, but is it stronger or is it sleepier? Um, is just thinking about some pulling movements. So those muscles back there control the pulling movements of our arms and our shoulders. So let's say you're doing a TheraBand exercise. Let's just say you're doing a row. Um, well, I'm thinking about this because, again, sometimes the stronger side can actually feel a little bit harder because it's shortened, and it's more impacted. But that's okay. Let's just maybe keep this answer simple. Like, which arm slash shoulder is harder for you to do a pulling motion? It can be a straight arm, like a straight arm pulling motion, or it can be a row. Which arm is harder to do? And I would say, again, for simplistic terms, that's probably your sleepier side. But keeping in mind that making sure that the side that it's harder to do it on isn't just because it's contracted and shortened and feeling tight. Like which side, connection wise and strength wise, actually has a harder time going from point A to point B, not from tightness, but from strength. that's asking a lot, and that might have complicated a little bit, but just if you're able to sense, if depending on your sensation and your connection, if you're able to sense like this is hard to pull based this is hard to pull because it's tight and it's restricted versus this is hard to pull because it's sleepy and I don't have a connection there. And if you can make that distinction, then hopefully you have your answer.
Okay, great. Okay, this next question is kind of interesting. Any harm in doing exercises on both sides? So assuming that you have a sleepy side.
Yeah. No. No. In fact, I had when we were doing the gum, like imagining you had just sat in gum and lifting your hips, I had mentioned do this on your more dominant side so that you can get a reference point for how dominant side feels versus sleepier side. Uh, Likewise, I would say for all of these exercises, do a few. In fact, it's helpful to actually, and I should have mentioned this, it's helpful to actually do the exercise the first time on your dominant side so that your sleepier side can mirror the dominant side. I don't know where this study, I'm remembering the study in my head, but I don't know where it was or how it was done. But I'm remembering a study where they started doing repetitions on the sleepier side and they started doing repetitions on the dominant side first. And folks that did it on the dominant side first did a better job, and again I don't know exactly what better job means, but did a better job in that the sleepier side was able to mirror and copy how the stronger side was doing it. So yeah, I would actually encourage you just to do like a few repetitions on that stronger side so that you have a point of reference, and so that that sleepier side could be like, oh, this is how you want me to do this. Yeah.
Very good. Okay. All right, next question is a little bit sort of long, so bear with me, Rach. The question says, I have a tilt in my pelvis on my stronger side, which is a left side. And this person goes to a chiropractor. They have to pad their stronger side under their left pelvis. She's also more prone to pressure sore on her right sort of sleepy side.
Okay.
So the question is it normal for the sleepy side to be painful both in the skin and deep after movement?
Hmm. Um, okay, I'm just slightly confused. But
Yeah,
um,
too many,
so wait, can you read the last part where it said, "Is it normal for the sleepier side to be painful
right, to be painful both in the skin and deep after movement.
after movement?"
So I guess,
Yeah, yeah. I'll say in response to that, if you're doing a whole movement routine and you're feeling some discomfort, some nerve pain, some funky things going on in your body, and those flare ups come especially after you have done intentional movement. I would say, in general, and my clients never like this answer, but I look at that as kind of a good thing. It doesn't feel good for the client, but it means that your nervous system, your myofascial meridians, everything is communicating. It means the signals are getting a little confused, and your body is interpreting some of the movement that has happened as pain signals, which we don't want. But hopefully the more that you do that kind of movement, um, the more those signals can finally start to connect and fire in the way that we want them to, of okay, this isn't pain, this is me hiking my right hip. So I would say those sometimes those kind of flare-ups, as long as they're not too intense. I've had some clients where they've been really intense post movement, and then we have to scale back the intensity and the time and the amount of movement we do. As long as it's not too intense and those flare-ups are happening, usually that is a good sign, like things are trying to communicate with each other. I'd say in the sense of what you said in the first part of your question, where it sounds like you said, and I'm not going to mirror you just because my brain is going to work faster here. You said, I think you said your left hip was hiked. your right side was longer, and so you were getting pressure sores under your right, it
Right.
sounds like on your
Yeah.
right side, which makes sense because when we hike that side, and you can see me right now, I'm automatically shifting more weight onto the right side. I would say you mentioned it sounded like you're putting a prop under the left side, which I don't
Um,
fully understand because I feel like that would actually put more pressure um, on the right side. The saying "prop what is dropped here," like for folks who have scoliosis, or if you're just trying to find a little bit more alignment, if you were like this, we would actually be putting a prop under your right sit bone. So it would actually shift your weight back to the left.
mhm.
Again, I'm not sure if that's what's going on in your case, but that's, yeah. For your question, I feel like that's as far as I can answer.
Yeah, she says she tends to not want to move it. Uh, anyhow,
Okay.
all right, next question. This person is a C7, 20 years since injury, and they tend to slouch forward in their seat, or in their seated position.
Mm.
Could Is that considered sort of sleepy, the sleepy side as your basically your abdominal area or your back?
Yeah. I love that question. I would say probably both, to be honest. But if we're looking at what part of your body is lengthened and sleepy, it's going to be your back because you're like this. And I'm really exaggerating here, but your back is lengthened and it's sleepy and it could use a little bit more activation. So, yeah, the short answer is your back. The long answer is both, and both probably need strengthening. But you could focus on your back at least as a place to start.
Yep. All
Yeah.
righty. Those are all the questions. Thank you,
Awesome.
Rachel. Thank you, everyone. Once again, these presentations are made possible through the generosity of our donors, so we're grateful to them. And we have been recording this presentation, so you will all have a copy of it with a link to the video recording first thing tomorrow morning to either replay it or share it with others. Thank you, Rachel, for doing yet another masterful job of addressing an issue that a lot of us with spinal cord injuries or paralysis, have to deal with. So I hope everyone enjoyed tonight's presentation, and Rachel's going to be back with us again next month. We have to figure out what the topic is going to be. But enjoy the rest of your evenings and evening, and thanks for joining us, everyone. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. See you next
Okay,
time.
have a good night. Bye,
You
everyone.
too. Bye.